AskReddit-Teachers of Reddit, what is your best read the note to the class story? My then fiancée was a high school math teacher. One day she thought she saw a note being passed, but she wasn't sure, so she waited. Then she thought she saw it again. Finally she saw it, walked over, and took it. It was a wedding card, signed by half of the class before she took it. She cried. Edit, yes, she's now my wife. Not really a note, but when I was teaching college classes, I caught two of the girls whispering, so I told them, if you're going to tell secrets, you need to share with the rest of the class. I taught preschool before this. She looked right at me and said, without the slightest embarrassment, I was just telling her that I think you have a cute butt. I was teaching a communications class, and we were discussing communications in the workplace, and I looked down at the textbook. After seeing what the next section was, I said, okay, moving on to the next section, titled, Sexual Harassment. Everyone roared with laughter. A couple weeks later, at a baseball game paid for by the school, she came on to me really hard, with my fiancé right there. Not a teacher, but when I was in high school, I started a note from the back row of the class, which was passed and read by nearly everyone in the class. The teacher grabbed it as it went past him, when there was only 3 people left who hasn't read it. I think he was going to read it out to the class, but he looked at it before he read it. All the note said was that the zip on his pants was down. With all respect to him, he calmly zipped up and continued teaching. In health class, we were talking about boners and how they fill up with blood. My cousin took a piece of paper and wrote, "Your penis is filled with blood," and threw it at some popular kid. The teacher picked it up, and you can see him die inside because of the immaturity of 8th graders and how he has to teach them for a career. Student not a teacher. In maybe the 4th or 5th grade, a kid is trying to pass me a note and is caught by the teacher. I wasn't paying attention to where it came from. I only noticed when it was about to be handed to me. She makes him read the note in front of the class. He reads the note and it says, "You wanna be my boyfriend? I like the way your booty moves when you walk." I overreact and say, "I'm not gay." And the boy says, "I didn't write that, it came from Tasha." Everyone laughs, and she and I are both extremely embarrassed. After class I go to talk to her at the locker, and she says, "Yeah, I wrote it, but I don't like you like that anymore." Legend has it I'm still single to this day. One day in middle school, right around when the Nintendo Wii came out, you could add other friends online for certain compatible online Wii games by sharing a serial code of like 16 numbers or something around there. Sitting in the back of our 7th period science class, 3 of my friends and I started to exchange and write down our Wii serial codes on a small piece of paper. We'd pass it down and share it as we passed it and copy them in our notebooks. Our teacher pauses his lecture as he looks at us. He just gets up from the front of the class, walked to our row where the 4 of us sat, put his hand out to my buddy for the paper with all of our serial codes on it, takes a moment to glance at it only to see a matrix of random numbers followed by the first letter of our names. He then glances up at us, and then to my buddy with the most dumbfounded stare, squints, and asked, "Is this some kind of joke? 'Cause I'm clueless on this one." My buddy that had to explain ourselves, saved us all the embarrassment and said I'll explain after class as he blushed. Luckily our teacher was a really cool dude, and was fine with that answer and told us to just put it away. We told him after class, and he understood, but also said he was expecting some sort of elaborate code that we were encrypting messages in. Haha. In high school, a girl in class passed a note to another girl, asking if she had a pad or tampon. Teacher completely blew up, started yelling at them, and asked them to read it out loud. They did, and the teacher, who was an older man, immediately calmed down and let it go. I think he was more embarrassed than the girls. I once tried passing a tampon to a friend in class, but I guess the teacher thought it was candy. Wrappers got all bright and fancy in the torts, so he like grabs it out of my hand, yanks it to eye level and immediately drops it like it burned him. I was embarrassed, but my friend just walked over, picked it up and said, "I need a hall pass." I can't remember, but I think he told her to wait till class was over. Not a teacher. Someone in my class had a cold and wiped their snot into a scrap piece of paper, as they didn't have a tissue. They then scrunched it up and left it on the side of their desk. Teacher saw this, thought it was a note and grabbed the paper, going through the usual fanfare of the importance not passing notes around. The look on her face when she opened it was priceless. When I was in high school, we had a kid pass a note to another kid, all subtle alike. They both sat behind me in the same row. The kid did not even read it, he put it in his pocket, but the teacher saw. She made him stand up and told him to pull out the note. He refused. She told him to pull out the note again, and he refused. She legit reached into his pocket and said something like, "Let's see what you are hiding from class." She saw the contents and went white. She grabbed both boys and led them to the office immediately. The note, which I later found out, said something along the lines of, "Package left in second trash can of the third empty room," or something like that, with gun. "You won't need it. Don't duck this up." The police found a small amount of heroin and a .22 pistol with no ammo in the said trash can underneath some balled up papers. This turned into a mess where the kids both claimed neither one wrote the note, and were not the intended recipient. So the school said they would expel everyone from that line of desks, which our parents pretty much stopped. The police tried searching all of our homes, but my parents refused to allow anyone into our home. I was in a band at the time and had to take a drug test every 6 weeks. My parents believed me, so they refused to allow the police to search the home. The event never got punished, because they could never prove anything other than the teacher saw two kids pass a note. About 4 years after graduation, I saw on MySpace, yup, that long ago, that one of them died to an OD and the other was arrested for his murder. They never got him for the murder of supplying drugs to a druggee, but did get him on a drug charge. Student, not the teacher. In my college thermodynamics class, the professor said that he didn't care if we got a text message in class, however he did care if we had our ringers on. So his rule was that if you got a text message and your phone went off loud enough for the whole room to hear it, you had two options. You could either read the text out loud to the whole class, or you could bring in donuts for everyone at the next class. There were about 20 of us. Of course everyone keeps their phones on silent, so it never happens. Until smack dab in the middle of one of the exams, when the professor's phone gets a text message and rings out loud and clear in the middle of the exam. Professor freezes, takes one look at his phone as we all start giggling, and says, "Guess, I'm bringing you guys all donuts on Wednesday." They were delicious. Another non-teacher here, but my 7th grade teacher typically always wore a dress shirt to class and looked very presentable, but this day he had his sleeves rolled up. Now, everyone loved this teacher, but my immediate thought was to write a note to my friend sitting beside me that his arms were super hairy, and that note was passed back and forth with us cracking jokes about it. Nothing malicious or overly mean, just that we didn't think he'd have such hairy arms. We eventually got caught, and between classes he took us aside and warned us to not pass notes, and since this was the first time this happened he would toss it out without reading it and let us go. Well, a couple months go by and he decides to wear short sleeves again, and his arms were noticeably less hairy. I know 12-year-olds don't have the greatest moral compass, but to this day I still feel so bad that my dumbass little note might have made him so self-conscious about something so unimportant. I'm sorry, Mr. Fifield, wherever you are now. 11th grade physics class. I teach maths, but I was assigned to be present in the class for supervision. In that school, new teachers get to have a more experienced one in the classroom. I was standing at the back of the class when I saw two kids passing around notes, and said, "You want to read that out loud or maybe give it to me? I could use something to read, to help out the guy with not having to deal with it and continue the lesson." That didn't happen though. The boys start laughing, which makes the class and me laugh as well. Damn the infectious laughter, lol. Instead of giving the paper straight to me, I didn't expect them to read it. The boy opens the note and takes a deep breath. He reads out loud, "Imagine everybody tied to the spring is a slice of ham." Everyone lost it. It was such a random thing to say. I believe the physics teacher still has that note. I taught for a decade in a really rough area. I intercepted a lot of notes, and was pretty shameless in public humiliation of my kids. I read a lot of bad stuff out loud. However, one really nice moment that stands out was when the super popular bubbly Latina girl sat next to the stereotyped depressed weird white theater band girl. I see them passing notes, which is really uncharacteristic. The band girl seemed off and upset, but I'll let it go because it seemed like there was something going on more, and the Latina girl was a really nice kid. I didn't think she was bullying or anything. I had the girls stay after for a second and asked them what was up. The Latina girl said, "I was worried about her, she looked sadder than usual. So I wanted to make sure she's cool." I asked the other girl if that's what was happening, and she said yup, and showed me the notes, which was a really heartfelt convo about boys, relationships and feeling lonely. It was so damned sweet. I asked if they needed more time, and they both said yes. I could get them excused from their next class, and they asked if they could chill and talk more. I said sure, because you bet your ass wellness and mental health is a duck ton more important than curriculum. They really had a moment, and it seemed to help them both. This was as 10th graders. I got to see them really develop a nice friendship over the next few years. Not a teacher, but something one of my teachers told me outside of school. The students were learning about properties of rocks and minerals. The first student wrote, "What's cleavage?" on a note, referencing the mineral property. The second student responded with a human anatomy description. I am not a teacher, but I have a story which was kind of the opposite. When I was in college, I was in a large math lecture hall 2 times a week, and me and my friends took to making paper planes and throwing them down from the back of the theater. We did it often, and I am sure we thought we were hilarious. Somehow nobody said a word except for the occasional snicker, and it went on like that, on and off for the semester. Then, on the last day, I remember writing, "Happy Christmas Dr. Jones," on a plane and throwing it down, seeing it land in front of the lecturer. He blew a fuse and started shouting about how this had been going on all semester, and he thought it was a disgrace. Then he picked up the plane and read the message, got very embarrassed, and meekly said, "Thank you." I still cringe to think of my childish actions, but it did give me that moment of connection with the lecturer, before failing his class. I'm the student in the story, not the teacher. Yeah, I know, but my current students all text or message on their laptops rather than passing physical notes. In 7th grade science class, my friend and I passed notes to each other through the guys sitting between us. Our teacher caught one of the boys with the note, but knew it wasn't him because it had enough doodles of hearts flowers on it. She opened it up to read to the class to catch whoever did write it. However, the note was written completely in Tolkien's Elvish alphabet, and she couldn't read a word. Most of the class knew that it had to be me and my friend, cause we're the only Lord of the Rings nerds in the class obsessed enough to teach ourselves the Elvish alphabet, but thankfully no one ratted us out. We were hoping that writing notes in Elvish would keep the boys from reading about my friend's massive crush on one of them, but it ended up also saving us from getting in trouble. I was in 8th grade, and it was a hot, sunny day in mid-May. I wrote, "It's snowing," on a piece of paper and showed it to my friend sitting next to me, who immediately looked out the window. We both laughed because obviously it wasn't snowing. Then he and I laughed when I showed it to another student, and they immediately looked out the window. And so on until most of the class is in on the joke, and watching as I show the piece of paper to the next unwitting fool. Almost every student knows what's going on when my teacher sees that I'm showing this piece of paper to everyone and making them laugh. She walks over to my desk, looks down at the piece of paper that says, "It's snowing," and instinctively looks out the window. The entire class bursts out in laughter,